Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about the best approach chords, or perhaps the most commonly used approach chords, when we're entering a flat 2 chord. So the first thing is, you might be thinking, flat 2 chord, come again? Why would we want to even think about using a flat 2 chord? Let's ponder it. We're in the key of C major for this example. So chord 2 is this minor chord D, F, A. So if I want to make it a flat 2 chord, I'm going to make it a flat 2 major chord. All I've got to do is lower the root of that chord and the fifth. So D goes to D flat, A goes to A flat. If I'm in the minor key, if I'm in C minor, I've got D, F, A flat to start with for a 2. All I need to do is lower the root from D to D flat to make that a major chord. But what I want to end up with is a major chord on the flattened 2nd degree, the flattened supertonic. This is otherwise known as a Neapolitan chord. Lovely colour chord that can add just a bit of spice and drama to music. So sometimes you're in the key of C major, you're playing a piece of music or looking at a piece of music, and you think, oh my goodness, in the middle of a phrase in the key of C major, I suddenly see a D flat major chord. What's that doing there? D flat major's got 5 flats, C major's got no flats. It doesn't make any sense. It does, because it's a Neapolitan chord in C major, or it's the major chord on flat 2. So great chord to know about and a great chord to use. But what are the best approaches to it? So we've got to be a little bit careful about trying to avoid consecutives, trying to avoid really awkward melodic intervals that are going to kind of get in the way of that being a smooth transition. So let's think about what some of our options might be. Well, a very obvious starting point is the tonic chord, chord 1. What happens if I go chord 1 followed by this Neapolitan, this flat 2 chord? And by the way, this flat 2 Neapolitan chord is nearly always used in first inversion. Doesn't have to be, but it nearly always is. So if I go 1 to this Neapolitan, first inversion, this major flat 2 chord, this is 1 followed by the Neapolitan. So that's quite an effective progression. You know, you can feel that that 1 going to the Neapolitan is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. You know, why is that? Well, you look at this. That's just going up by a semitone, a half step. So is that. So is that. The only leaping part is the bass part, and that's a strong move from a tonic to a subdominant, the 4th degree of the scale. So it's going to help us to get good kind of smooth part writing and going from a strong chord onto the Neapolitan. So that's you know, a really useful one to use. There's nothing to stop you using chord 1b, as we call it in this part of the world. You might know it as a 1-6-3 or a 1-6. It's the tonic chord in its first inversion. So it's the same thing, but it gives us one first inversion chord followed by another. If the Neapolitan's in first inversion, why not have your tonic in first inversion too? Works perfectly well, doesn't it? So that's fine. And again, you can see that I've got some nice kind of stepwise movement going on. I've just got that 1 leap there. The main reason why I haven't gone stepwise there is you don't want a D flat in the tenor here, because it will give you octaves with that part there. So that's why I've got this falling thirds to avoid that happening. So there we are. We could go from the tonic chord in root position or first inversion onto the major chord on flat 2, the Neapolitan. Are there any other options? Well, what about this? I'm now looking at using chord 2b or chord 2-6 as an approach chord. Let's think about this one. So I could go and move on. It works quite well, doesn't it? Now, why does this work? Well, it works particularly well because look at the common notes. You know, I've got F and F. So I've got 2 parts there using that F as a common note, which is quite handy, isn't it? I've got this just moving by a semitone or a half step. and I've got the same thing going on there. So that works quite nicely. Notice my little cautionary note here. Try to avoid 2A or 2 in root position as an approach, because you can run into some real bother with the false relations. You don't have to, you can organize things accordingly, but sometimes you might, for example, end up with an A in the tenor followed by an A flat in the alto, and you get this, I'm using the same note with a different accidental, but leaping from one octave to another, different parts. That's all false relations. So be a bit careful about generating false relations. One way of helping you to avoid them is to use 2 in first inversion. It's not imperative if you can find a way around it, because there are ways around it, but you have to be just a little bit careful. So that's 1 in root position or first inversion. It's 2, particularly thinking about 2 in first inversion. What about chord 4? Well, that's also quite a handy progression. So here's 4 followed by this Neapolitan. Sounds quite nice as well, doesn't it? I mean, there are different ways you could arrange that. You could do the F's repeated in the top part. It doesn't really matter. It gives you pretty good part writing, doesn't it? And again, you've got common notes, because you've got F at the bottom of 4 and F at the bottom of your Neapolitan or your flat 2 when it's in first inversion. So it's really useful to have that common note in the bass. All these approaches, by the way, as I'm saying here, work very nicely in minor keys as well as in major keys. So you can think about those. However, be a little bit careful if you're thinking about using chord 6 in a major key followed by a Neapolitan. Again, we get false relations if we're not careful, that kind of stuff. However, if you use 6 in a minor key followed by a Neapolitan, that's usually a more successful business, because you can see in C major, I would end up with A naturals followed by an A flat. That's all a bit awkward by the false relations. But when I'm in C minor, chord 6 already contains A flat, and I've got A flat in the Neapolitan. So that's rather nice to have that common note. And it works very nicely too. If I'm in C minor and I go 6 Neapolitan, actually works quite effectively. Now, are there other possible approach chords? Yes, there are. Feel free to experiment. And the basic rule of thumb is this: if it sounds good and you're happy with it, use it. Search out examples that maybe are not so conventional. But there are good reasons why these particular examples work especially well, to do with avoiding false relations and having good part movement from one chord to the next. So the progression integrates. You have to remember, the Neapolitan in a diatonic piece of music is a bit of a shock, You're suddenly using a chord that doesn't actually belong to the diatonic chords in a key. So if you can make your pathway to that chord a bit smooth, it's going to be more subtle than just slamming us into this flat 2 major chord. But those are common progressions. They work particularly well, and certainly if you're starting out trying to use these chromatic chords, then start by rehearsing these kind of progressions, and then if you want to step outside the box and look at other possibilities later, they're all there for you. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, have a look at our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Maybe that you're perfectly happy with all these chromatic chords and dealing with figured bass and, learning how to analyze something, write a bit of harmony, all that kind of stuff. But maybe you're thinking, actually, that is the stuff that I really need to go at. If your kind of basic theory skills are in place, let me point you to our advanced theory course. So if you go to courses on the homepage there, you'll soon find your way to advanced theory, and that really is unpacking all of that territory. So if that's something you think, I kind of know the basics, but I really want to get into understanding all this stuff properly, that is the course for you. So have a look at that one and see if you think that matches your needs. Lots of other courses there as well, lots of other things to look at on the website. www.mmcourses.co.uk. UK.